Hello everybody, welcome to Nature at Home. My name is Joel and today we're going to be learning about white-tailed deer. You guys probably somewhat familiar with white-tailed deer already. They're a very common animal. People who are hunters will probably know just about everything I'm going to say right in the next few minutes. But for people who aren't hunters, here's some good information on them. So our white-tailed deer are probably the largest animal we have here in the park. We don't have any moose or bear that live here. They sometimes migrate through, but they don't live here permanently at all. We have probably about 200 to 300 deer in this park. I've been asked that question quite a bit. We did a population survey last year and came up around 250, so that's a rough estimate. Deer start their life as fawns. Mother deer gives birth to one fawn usually, sometimes twins, and on rare occasions you get triplets even. They'll spend the first year of their life generally with their mom. When they're very young fawns and they still have their spot, their mothers usually keep them hidden in the grass and woods. The mother only will check on them several times a day. The rest of the time she'll be going out, eating, doing her business, and then she'll just check in on them a couple times a day. So if you ever do come across a fawn hidden in the grass, there's no deer around, the mother hasn't abandoned it. She's just going off doing her business and she'll be back to check on it. So please just leave the baby deer right where it is. The female fawns will stay with their mother for usually the full year until the next spring. The male fawns usually get chased off by their mother a little bit earlier. And then sometimes these males will form kind of loose, like bachelor groups, and will live together. After about a year, the yearlings run off. The female has her next set of fawns and keeps going from there. If you see some deer in the winter, you can usually tell the yearlings from the adult female does just by the shape of their face and their body. Does have kind of a very long snout versus yearlings kind of have a very short, stubby little snout. And then bucks are pretty obvious until they lose their antlers, and then they can look a lot similar to a doe, usually a little bigger bodied. White-tailed deer eat a variety of plants and herbs throughout the year. Depending on what is growing is what they're going to go after the most. And then in the wintertime, they resort to eating grasses, any leftover vegetation is still green. Pine needles are a favorite. Bark off trees if they get really desperate, or they'll have to try to eat birds to eat out of your feeder. Okay, now winter starvation is the biggest killer of white-tailed deer. Up to 25% of your population, sometimes even more, can die in the wintertime. That's due to just a shortage of food and harsh cold temperatures. Some animals succumb to the cold every year. There's just not enough food to go around, so a lot of them die that way. It's part of the reason why we have hunting season when we do. It's to decrease the amount of mouths to feed before you go into wintertime. Now, sometimes this maybe if you want to feed deer and put out food for your deer, this is illegal in New York State, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First one being that it congregates all the deer together, one tight spot, and then they end up spreading diseases like chronic wasting disease is one of the big ones that they can spread around. Brainworm is another disease they can spread. So they advise not to feed them. The other problem with feeding is if you feed for a couple of years, you can bolster that deer population. You can be higher than it normally would because they're not dying off in the winter. What can happen from that is you get a harsh winter, and then because there's even more deer than there was before, there's even greater food shortage in that winter, and they can crash even harder than normal, and then you'll go into a real deep deficit with very few deer. If deer populations get too high, this can also cause problems. They can create browse lines where you look out into the woods and you'll see there's like a clear line where there's almost no green vegetation below it. It's all been eaten out. This destroys habitat for certain types of birds, smaller mammals, stuff like cottontail rabbits. They lose their habitat. Grouse, if there's too many deer, can lose their habitat. There's not any cover for them to hide behind. You can also lose different species of trees. The deer will eat every little sapling that comes up, and so every time a new sapling comes up, the deer will eat it. So your tree population will get really old. You won't have any recruitment. No new young trees will be born. And eventually you can lose a certain species of tree. Out here in our Moses State Park, we have almost no young pine trees. There's like no pine trees that are less than like 20 years old. They've all pretty much been eaten by deer. We also have no staghorn sumac. As soon as it sprouts up anywhere, the deer just devastate and eat it. Deer have several natural predators. When they're fawns, they can fall prey to fisher, bobcat, bear, coyote. As they get older, they usually pretty much their only two natural predators now are coyotes and bobcats, and that's usually mostly just in the winter. Late in the winter, the deer get weak, they're low on food, they're cold. They also don't float on top of the deep snow as easy as a bobcat or a coyote, who's not as heavy, has a bigger foot. Sometimes bobcats will prey on sleeping deer, and coyotes will run down weak or sick deer and eat them. So it's good to have natural predators. We've eliminated their bigger natural predators like wolves and mountain lions. And now white-tailed deer usually lives about 4.5 years in the wild as the average lifespan. If you find a 6-year-old deer in the wild, that's a really old deer. In captivity though, they can live up to 14 years. That's a rare case, but usually in the wild it's harsh circumstance, so they usually die before then. And now, so let's talk about some white-tailed deer adaptations. So one thing, the most noticeable thing to me about white-tailed deer, first off, is their antlers. The males grow antlers, females typically do not. There's a few rare cases out there. The difference between an antler and a horn, real quick, is horns are grown once by an animal. They are made of keratin, like your fingernails or your hair, and they don't lose it their whole life. Antlers are made of bone, and the animal grows them every year. They fall off at some point in the year, and then they will regrow a new set the next year. As the deer gets older, its antlers grow larger, typically. Larger antler size also has to do with the deer's genetics. They have good genetics, and also the deer's diet, and even the diet of the deer's mother. So good prenatal vitamins are also key in growing big antlers. If that deer's mother had good food and good feed, then that male deer could be born with a good set of antlers, the potential to get a good set of antlers. If they count a deer, say like an 8-point buck or something like that, it's just counting how many spikes or how many tines are on the deer's antler. This was probably from an 8-point buck here, if he was symmetrical. The reason deer have antlers, the males use them for fighting for territory. They lock together with each other, and it's like a wrestling match. They also can use them for marking territory as well. Deer will use their antler and they'll rub it against a tree and mark a tree as part of their territory, showing, hey, this is my area, my zone. Now, I get asked sometimes, if we have so many deer in the park and if they're losing their antlers every year, how come we don't see antlers in the woods all the time? And that's because antlers are actually eaten by lots of other animals. So after they fall off by the deer, rodents, porcupines, squirrels, chipmunks, mice, they all want to eat these things. And so they actually gnaw and chew on them. And you can actually see on this one where it's been chewed and gnawed on by some rodents before we found it. So they just get eaten up and they vanish if you don't find them soon enough. They usually drop off the deer usually in early winter. It's typically where they fall off. Okay, another adaptation of deer is their fur. So they have thick fur coat. If you ever feel deer fur, it's very coarse and bristly, toothbrush almost. That's because the hairs are hollow. They have a little space of air in the middle of each one. This gives them very good insulating value. So it's right, all that air trapped in there, just like the air in your house and your insulation. It also means that deer float very well because all those hollow hairs. And they actually are very good swimmers. They swim from island to island across the St. Lawrence. They swim on and off of the park quite a bit. So they do move around a lot like that, a lot more than people would think. Deer also have very large ears. There you go. Right? So their ears they have good muscular control of them. If you ever watch a deer for very long, they swivel their ears around. They have very good sense of hearing. Okay. And then another most notable thing, like hunters would probably think about with deer, is their incredible sense of smell. If you're a hunter, you know that if you are downwind or upwind of the deer, if your scent is blowing to the deer, you're not going to have a really good chance of seeing any deer ever getting, because they'll pick you up far before they even see you and before you see them. So this is a deer's skull, and this whole space right here, actually there was a little bit of bone right here, but it broke off. This is all their nasal cavity. So they have a huge nasal cavity. There's a lot of fold, so bone in there, a lot of surface area. More surface area equals more smell receptors. So they have a very good sense of smell. And not only do they use it to warn them about predators, but they also can communicate using sense of smell. They have several glands on their body they put out scents with, and then other deer can smell that, and they can talk that way too. One is they have a gland right in the corner of their eyeball, right about here, and they'll rub that on like a tree branch, and that's kind of a very unique scent signature for every deer, letting other deer know who they are and where they go, where their territory is. Bucks will usually leave that next to a buck rub. Does can leave it if they're interested in meeting a buck. Other bucks will leave it if they want to challenge that buck. Right. Actually, another one that's on the head is bucks have another gland back in the forehead, and you'll see this sometimes. You can see a deer and it looks like it has like a dark stain on the back of his head. That's probably a male deer, and that they mark trees when they rub it with their head. That leaves behind some scent. Also, I have the deer skull in my hand. I'll talk really quick about their teeth. You notice they have no teeth on the front of their mouth on the top. They only have a few on the bottom. The rest of their teeth are all in the back, all pretty much molars, vegetarians. You can age a deer by its teeth. It's the best way to age them. This was a young one, as its teeth were pretty pointy still. As they get older, those teeth get worn down, they get flat. You find a really old deer, like a 6-year-old deer, its teeth can be worn down to the gums. Because they don't have any real teeth up in the front, they can't chop off branches with their bite. They kind of just grab the branch and then just kind of tear. And so you can always tell if a branch was eaten by a deer, because it'll kind of be like a rough, ragged cut, or a bunch of the leaves will just be torn off. It won't be like a nice clean cut that would be left behind from, say, like a rabbit or a beaver, something like that. Another gland they have is actually on their foot. It's right between their toes. And this gland actually secretes smell as they walk around on trails. As they walk on trails more and more, other deer can smell that, and they know if a trail's been used recently by another deer, what direction the deer was heading, whatever direction the smell is stronger in. How much that trail is used. Is it used by lots of deer? Is it barely used? Just by the sense of the smell. So they kind of leave behind little trackers as they walk. They also have another gland on the inside of, like, it looks like their knee, but it's really their heel. It's like their tarsal gland. You'll see this dark stain on their leg. That's also a scent gland. Okay, let's go outside now. We're gonna look for some signs of deer activity. Okay, one of the most obvious signs of white-tailed deer is deer droppings, deer poop, scat. They look like these right here. I was always told they look a lot like Raisinets, the candy. Smooth and kind of oval shaped versus rabbit poop, which is usually round and more rough in texture. And they can be larger than this too. They're not always tiny like this. It's always a good thing not to touch any kind of animal feces with your hands. That usually goes without saying. Most people don't want to do it. But different deer can carry disease, raccoons can carry disease and parasites. So please don't ever play with animal poop with your hands. So right now I'm standing on a deer path. They have runs they use, just like we like to walk on path like this behind me, because it's clear and out of the way. Deer are the exact same way. They want a nice clear runway, less branches, they can move faster. They like to use human paths all the time as well. But this right here is a deer path. If you look down both sides, you can see kind of that dark, worn spot going right down through the woods. Right? And deer will run. If you were to put up cameras, or if you wanted to sit and wait here at nighttime, you have quite a few deer probably move down this path every single night. This one's really well worn, so there's a ton of deer that run on this. How worn your path is a good indicator of how many deer you have on your property or in the woods where you are. Right? And if you look here, we have a nice set of deer tracks. It's a pretty good one in the mud. So we got deers going both ways. This deer here is running in this direction. We have another one running in this direction. And you can see they have 4 toes on their feet. There's the 2 big toes they walk on the most. And then they have 2 smaller dew claws that are up higher on their leg. And sometimes those show up in their track. I hear some people say that if you see the 2 dew claw marks, that's a buck, like that. Not necessarily. That could be a doe as well. It just depends how they're running and how deep the muck is, if those dew claws stick in and make marks like that right there. Okay, so another obvious sign of deer activity are tree rubbings. So if you look right here, you can see how all the bark has been shredded right off of this tree. It's quite a bit. And so this is from a buck marking its territory. It's kind of their version of putting up a posted sign saying this is my zone, my property. The way they do it is they use their antler, and then they have a really rough section, especially up in the front, and they just rub it against the tree a bunch, like that. They can rub it in the middle parts, like that. And you can see how, just a little, doing that for just a quick few seconds, already starting to scrape a bunch of the bark off this tree. Okay. Yeah, and then after a buck would do this, it would probably go up to a branch around here, maybe a branch like this, and mark it with its little eyeball gland. Try and put his unique scent there, saying, you know, this is Joel the deer's spot right here. Yep. Oh, it's a shoulder blade. And it's oh, I forget which one this is. It's this bone right here though. Looks like, oh, it's this collarbone. Looks like this one right here. We got a shoulder blade. And I think this guy, maybe this way, I think. And I think that's like a radius and an ulna. I think, like the 2 that go together, like right there. And then what else we got in here? More like little metatarsals or something. Yep. Oh yeah. See, there's his toes. Those here were the 4 toes of the deer. Yeah, and these were some of those little metatarsals right here. So it's a deer like probably a coyote drags it over here this winter. So everybody, thank you for joining us today at Nature of Home, learning about white-tailed deer. I'd also like to thank the New York Power Authority for providing the funding for the Nature Center and all the programs we do here. Hope you guys tune in next time. I'll catch you then.